best bank to work for, top bank, a lot of these things that we don't strive for just happens, top rated, fastest growing, all those things. And, there's been many interviews, articles, like they hear about, like, is this really true? Can I interview you and talk about this? And, you talk about someone that maybe it'd be on the other side of the country, they still don't fully understand because they say, oh yeah, I know this bank that does that too, or does this too. And you don't truly understand until you walk into our place to know the true difference. Because there's a lot of great banks out there that they work hard on their culture and they have great customer service, but they really truly don't understand until they walk into one of our offices.
Welcome, everybody, to the Pay It Forward podcast. I am one of your hosts, Austin Seward, along with my co-host, Keegan Walls, and today we have the pleasure of sitting down with Dennis Vogel. Dennis is the president and CEO of Citizens State Bank, right next door to our studio and office. Citizens State Bank is one of the fastest-growing banks in Wisconsin, ranked nationally as one of the best banks to work for. I'm a customer of Citizens, and I work with a lot of different lenders, a lot of different banks in town, but it is different walking into Citizens from the moment that you walk in. I feel like a celebrity. Everybody knows my name. There's people 50 feet away at their desk that are yelling hi. It is an unbelievable experience. Free coffee, nothing like I have ever seen in the banking industry. So thank you for being here today, Dennis.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So why don't you share a little bit about Citizens, what you guys are up to now?
Well, we have a lot going on. That's one thing that's always constant in our organization is change and what's the next big thing. And we had a major system upgrade about a year ago, still working through all that, creating efficiencies, always listening to the customers, what more can we do? But really, you talked about how different we are. I always think about what's that next thing where people say we can't do something and we're going to do it. Yeah. And it really goes back to our three uniques of creating value, the citizens experience, and dynamic culture. And that's where my mind is always working and thinking, what more can we do? What's the next best thing? But also making sure, getting the right people on the bus and in the right seat. You've heard that term before, Jim Collins. And we're constantly going through that. And we're going through some of that right now. But that's, you go through storytelling, you got to get down here, get the people that need to get out, get them out, get the right people back in. And that's how we've elevated and been one of the top-rated banks in the country over the last 18 years.
Awesome. And how many locations do you guys have? What does the size of your team look like?
4. We altogether have about 100 employees and 4 locations. The headquarters is right next door here, La Crosse, Onalaska, Clayton, and Eau Claire. So you might say, okay, we're in western Wisconsin, but really we have customers all over the country. California, Florida. It's just our mindset that is different than some banks that, well, it's not within a 20-mile radius, that's not really a customer. But we do a lot of business up in Minneapolis, so I really say our core is Minneapolis to Chicago, but leveraging technology, we have clients over the country. And so it's not about bricks and mortar for us anymore. People don't come into the bank very often, and that's one of the reasons why I did the cafe and the coffee is just to create that traffic for people coming in and creating value. But outside of those markets where we have offices, it's really about the experience and how we can create value for those customers. And that's why we have customers all over the country because they're really tired of the conventional bank where they're just a number. And that's what we created, that it's something unlike any other bank. And you described what it's like to walk in. People think that's not really real, and people walk in for the first time and are like, whoa. And that's why if someone walks in, it's not a customer. There's about a 95% close rate because they've never seen anything like this, never felt that way versus their bank. They walk in, it's dead. It feels like a funeral home. Nobody even greets them, and they're a bother. It's completely the opposite. It's Citizens, and so we're always working on that.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, I love it because I think if you think back to, okay, what business is not going to be exciting to go to? It's like DMV in a bank. Like, this is
Jeez, I didn't know it was that bad.
Okay, maybe not yours.
Yes,
but I'm just
yes.
saying, like, in general, like, okay, the bank, I'm going to drop off the check, and it's just another bucket.
It's a transaction.
I was in Citizens because I also bank at Citizens.
And thank you, by the way, both of you.
Was in there with now he's 2,
my
2-year-old, and I mean, you're doing a pretty good job if your bank is fun for a 2-year-old to walk in because you got the giant Connect 4 over there.
Yeah.
He wanted to stay and play, got a sucker, so I mean, like, it's a legitimate experience for people who have never been there. Like,
I gotta tell you,
my 2-year-old likes it. So
quick story on that. On a Saturday, I work 24/7, so I'm usually there on the weekend if I'm not traveling with my kids or sports or whatever. And one of my customers, and a lot of my customers are friends, he called and he said, hey, by chance, are you actually at the bank? I see your car is here. And I said, yeah, by the way. Well, I told my daughters that, we were going to the bank today, and they were super excited because this is like a trip of going to the museum or the zoo. And we pulled up and realized that the cafe lobby is not open on a Saturday. And I said, I'll be down right away. So went down, brought them into the cafe. His girls were there for about 25 minutes. That was their destination. It was go have fun at the bank. What other bank can say that?
Yeah, literally.
Yeah. So Dennis, you've been the president and CEO of Citizens for nearly 20 years. Bring us back to the early days of Dennis Vogel. What inspired you to someday lead a bank of over 100 people?
That was never in my aspirations. Yeah. And, people now that don't know my story think I was born with a silver spoon. Obviously this guy owns his own bank, CEO.
Yep.
He was just given it absolutely the complete opposite. I grew up very poor. I'm from Manitowoc, Wisconsin. And my parents got divorced at a young age. I think I was 5 or 6. Very difficult. And but if that wouldn't have happened, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. Even though there were some tough times, it forced me to grow up. Being with, a single mom and dealing with that. My dad was out of town a lot. And just a lot of adversity. And being very poor, living in low-income housing. And I know what it was like to go get the free food, go get the cheese and the milk and the hand-me-down jeans. And you look back at that, and even my wife would say, like, oh, I feel really bad. You know what? It didn't change my mindset. If anything, it just made me grateful. And when you grow up in an environment like that, you're told a lot of things that you cannot do or become because you don't have money and you come from that situation. And I always took that as motivation. I remember my friends, I was fortunate that, you're at a crossroads when you're a kid. You can make some really bad decisions and go down a different path. I was fortunate. I was at a fork sometimes. I never did that, but in sports, athletics was very important to me, but it was very frustrating. I remember, a lot of my friends on a Friday night would go to the YMCA, play basketball. They all had memberships. We couldn't afford that. And I think a day pass was $1 or $2 at that time. Often my mom said, sorry, I don't have the money. So I needed to find a way to how I was going to generate that $1 or $2, and I was going to get there. And so I think at a young age, I looked in the mirror and looked, what am I going to do? Making myself accountable. I'm not going to blame my situation or look at anybody else and look for handouts. I'm going to create this. So I think some leadership started already there, but that motivation of, you know what, tell me I can't do something, I'm going to do it. So fast forward, you go into, high school, and I wasn't the greatest student. I had a lot of fun. Academics were not the top priority, but I did enough to slide through. And, thinking about, oh my gosh, I probably should go do something, in college, and originally didn't know what I was going to do. And, I took the ACT and I applied for some colleges, but really didn't know. And I remember I applied for UWL, and I came here on a day for a campus close-up. It was snowing that day a little bit, and that was where it kind of just hit me. This is home. Mm-hmm. We are so fortunate to live in La Crosse, Wisconsin, which is a beautiful place. So I remember I haven't gotten accepted here, and turned out I got accepted. And at that time, you'd be in the top 35% or hit a certain threshold with an ACT. My ACT, I can tell you, was not very good, and I'm embarrassed to even tell you what that number was. But again, it was motivation. But I made it in by 2 people. My class had 383 kids. I had to be in the top 153. I was 151. Wow. Made it by 2 people. And I remember when I got accepted, I remember getting something from the admissions office that, okay, you're in, but looking at your ACT and your grades, this is the probability you might not be here your sophomore year. So another example of I'm going to prove you wrong. So came here, had a fantastic experience, and, A's, graduated in the top, percentage of my class. Just took that focus of what was a priority and what I wanted to get out of it. But before I graduated, there was a major event that happened in my life. My junior year in college, I ended up in a coma, a diabetic coma. Didn't know I was diabetic, and I should have died. And my roommates at that time were at spring break. My mom found me. They didn't know I was unconscious for 17 hours. So rushed to the Mayo Clinic and did all these tests and found out I was diabetic. And for anybody that's in the medical field or knows anything about diabetes, that my sugar count was over 1,600 And at that time, Mayo said they'd never seen a sugar level that high. And so they prepared my parents for the worst, that it's likely I'm not going to wake up. So several days pass, and they tell him that, hey, good news. It looks like he might wake up, but be prepared. He could be a vegetable. And so fully a week later, I wake up at that point. They didn't know, I was tied down for so long. And when you're in something like that, it's a, weird experience, near death and what's going on and what processes through your head. And, fast forwarding, when I was in that coma, I had applied for an internship at another community bank. They had called me back when I was in the coma and said, hey, we'd like to talk to Dennis. And I had heard about that when I woke up, but at that point, I couldn't even read yet because my eyes weren't working. I couldn't use my fingers. My doctors, the teachers, university was saying, take the semester off. I said, that's not going to be me. So I was in a hospital for another week doing therapy, went back home to Manitowoc. And later that next week, I could read. And I told my parents, against everybody's wishes, I'm going back. I've got that interview for that internship in banking, and I'm not going to just say goodbye to this semester. So again, another example where I was told I couldn't do something. I went and did it. So that kind of just developed that. And obviously I started that internship. It was only supposed to be for the summer for 20 hours, and the rest is history. So I ended up being hired there before I graduated, and got my first experience in banking. I learned that I loved it. But also I noticed that, we talked about banking was a pretty boring industry. But what I did was I became my own business unit. A lot of those principles that I identified, are representing Citizen State Bank, I developed in my own business unit about an experience like, no others, which is our mission right now at the bank. That's what I gave my customers, and creating value and having fun, because other bankers were just sitting at their desk waiting for that customer to come in. Yep. I was going out there. I didn't know anybody. I wasn't from this town. I had no excuses. I had no sales training, but you know what? I had the will. All the things were stacked against me. I was going to go out and network and network. So I was married to my career. When I was told no, I didn't accept it. I was going to find a way to do business with that person. So the success came. And then, during that, I saw a lot of great things, how to run a bank, but I also saw, man, there's some big opportunities. I could create something different here. And I was fortunate to do some business prior to starting Citizens with my now partners that have been involved in various banks across the state. And we developed a relationship. And it got to a point where, at the bank that I was at, it's time that, the entrepreneur in me of being a leader and seeing how I could create something that's outside of the box, and then being partnered up with my partners. And that all kind of came together in 2005. That, the headquarters, which is now next door, was an old Associated Bank. And also at the same time, similar time, is that Citizen State Bank of Clayton at that time was the second smallest bank in the state. So it's an opportunity to get a charter, open the bank here, and you never know how partnership's going to go. So when this all came out, it's like, oh my God, you don't want partners and everything. This is going to be horrible. Nobody can, make money in a brand new bank. Again, another opportunity that we're going to prove them wrong. And so that was kind of the foundation, and our partnership couldn't have been any better. Most banks, when they start, it's many, many years before they even break even. We turned a profit in the first year. And going back to all those customers that I brought to a previous bank, they majority of those customers left and followed and paid higher rates and fees. It was because of the experience and the value added, which is the foundation. At the time, I didn't realize that, but now looking back, I took my business model that I had for my individual self and created Citizen State Bank. I wanted to create something that was so different that it took time to get there, but because banking was so boring, and had to make sure I got the right things in process. And so, there's a lot of things in my past that helped me get to where I am. Never in a million years, growing up very poor, didn't have all the things you think you would have to create what I did. And I used that as motivation. And I think too many people nowadays have too many excuses. I go back to my medical, and, I've got diabetes, I've got scoliosis, I have gout, I have asthma, goes on and on. But we were just talking that I'm not going to miss a day of work. No excuses, in terms of athletics. Too many people have that, and those are the people who are not getting anywhere. So attitude has such a big impact, and what your future success is going to be.
Yeah, totally.
And so how long was it? So you did the internship, and then what was kind of the in between to growing into a CEO? Like, what was the time frame?
Yeah, it's a big jump there. Yeah, so I skipped a lot there,
I'm like, holy cow, he went from bank teller to CEO.
Yes.
So,
Yes, it was just like in a year, No, I, again, started 20 hours originally in that summer between my junior and senior year. And they liked what they saw, and they're like, hey, why don't you stick around, for next semester? And also, too, it got increased to full-time during the summer because they liked what I was doing. Hey, why don't you work 40 hours? And at the time, I was working another job. I was coaching baseball. Heck yeah, I'm going to do this. This is a great opportunity. They like what they're seeing. I'm going to take advantage of this. Even though I sacrificed some fun with some friends, even in my senior year because I was working, I wouldn't be where I'm at if I wouldn't have made that decision. And so I got to the first semester of my senior year, and I think they kind of knew that I was at the point where I'm starting to think about what am I going to do afterwards. And there was a couple opportunities outside of the area because I was like, I don't know if I want to stay in lacrosse. And they were basically like, you're not going anywhere. And that started that. So I started as a credit analyst, number crunching, and which I still love to do. But then I had this, I was one of the younger people, the youngest individual in the organization. And I obviously had the growth mindset. The majority of other people had a fixed mindset. They were very content. This is when technology was becoming very apparent. The Y2K was coming up. So I was the leader in terms of taking on new things. I became the network administrator. I became the Y2K coordinator. I became the merchant card processing manager. And then I became a loan officer. I was taking it all on, man. I was the sponge. And I worked very hard. Again, I was not committed in a relationship. And that was part of the reason because I was so committed to my career, but also building that network in the community. So I advanced many times, and before you know it, I'm overseeing credit administration, top business banker, VP, blah, blah, blah. So how do you take that step, So I knew, that I saw a different way to do things, and that wasn't going to align where I was at. And that's where, I was part of senior management at that time. So I saw enough of how do things work from the CFO side, from an operations side. Was I an expert? No. I look back when I started Citizens. Oh my God, I didn't know anything. I thought I knew enough to be dangerous, but I knew I had to put good people around me. And if I did that, I could be successful. I didn't need to know every single thing. And that's one thing I learned over my career is that early on, I knew every single thing about every process procedure. That was how I was. I was kind of going to micromanage this, and I was going to make sure it was done right because I was the only one that could do it perfectly like I could. But, that had to change over time and develop and use the people around me. So that had a big impact on that. So, yeah, fast forwarding. So within a 2-month period, I turned 30, I got engaged, and started Citizens State Bank. You talk about life-changing?
Yeah.
Yeah, and there was nights I'm sitting in bed, when at the time we didn't have this building. When we started it, we just had this little office up in Clayton, and I'm staying in a hotel, and I'm like, what the heck did I get myself into? Because the little old bank up there, it needed to be completely gutted because they didn't have even internet banking. I'm like, oh my God, it'd be easier to start from scratch, and we got to change the people. I'm like, I have to go backwards before I can go forward, And obviously that has been very successful in how we turned that operation around. And then August 2005 is when we officially opened here in La Crosse.
Did you see that? What you are now? Like, did you have any sort of that vision when you're like, oh, I'm starting out, here's where I want to get? Or was it
not to that same degree? No, no idea.
You
18
want to
years
do something
ago.
cool, but didn't have.
And I knew that, my partners and we knew we'd be successful against everybody else's odds. Did we think we would be where we're at in terms of the success that we have accomplished? No, not at all. Not at all. So every day I got to pinch myself.
Yeah.
And also, too, is that I'm fortunate, when I started the bank, I was motivated by money, success. That's what drove happiness, right? But that really never gives you happiness. Now how it's evolved, yes, those are great things, but that doesn't motivate me anymore. And everybody, I think, goes through that. Now it's truly because of what the impact of Citizens is on its employees, its customers, and the community. That's what motivates me. When our place changes someone's life, and I hear from her spouse or boyfriend or girlfriend thanking me and saying, your place, Citizens, saved our marriage, there's nothing more powerful. I never thought 18 years ago that's what we were talking about. I'm like, we're a bank, we're going to make it different. But did I ever think we'd be, recognized nationally for all the things that we do and the crazy things that we do? Never. Not at all.
So logistically, what does it take to start a bank? Like, how the heck does somebody? I want to start a bank.
That's pretty boring.
Logistically, like you mentioned, a bank charter.
Yeah.
How does that work? Most people don't know that.
That's very difficult. You got to have millions and millions of dollars, and I'm fortunate that I have, really good partners in the beginning of that because I didn't have a ton. I had a little bit because I was very successful. I wasn't married, and I was able to get a loan for my portion and structure it the right way. But it's a process, and it's much more difficult now. It's stringent, and you heard of de novo banks. Those are brand new startups where they have nothing, and it's more and more difficult to do that. Now you're talking about, the dollars it takes, and that's one of the reasons why we did the Clayton thing is that actually we thought initially it would be cheaper for us to buy a very small bank versus starting a de novo, which would have cost us a couple $1 million more. So what they're going to look at, it's a long process. They're going to look at, what's the ownership group? What's the management team? What kind of capital do you have? It's not like, hey, I'm going to go open up a McDonald's and then just buy a franchise. That's why you don't see it. And it's for good reasons because it's highly regulated and it can be, you can mess it up really bad. So it's a long process. It's very rare. People, when I started, asked me, how can I do this? And I'm like, well, good luck. You're not just going to get approval. Yeah, you got to have the right people. You got to have the right capital. And a lot of other things got to align. Does that market really need more banks? So that's kind of a short version of that.
And so there's a lot of different Citizens banks. There's Citizens State Bank, Citizens First. Are those banks all kind of commingled in one way or another? Or?
No, that's a very good question because we get that. And I always say that if you don't see the logo here on my coffee mug here, right here, that's not us.
Sure.
You'll know when you walk in the doors if it's not us. Right there. You'll know if you call and you'll know it's not us. So that's one of probably the things. And we discussed that early on about the name because it is common, just like there's a lot of First Nationals, First this, it can be confusing. And actually last week there was a gentleman that walked into the cafe and it happened to be, I held the door for him. And he looked at and he's like, he looked at his check. He says, is this the same Citizens? And he I'm like, no, sorry, that's a national. We don't have one. And he was just kind of like, he didn't even know what to say. I said, but you can open an account today and you can have this Citizens. And he just started laughing. He was from out of town. And we get that so often. So that is probably one of the downsides, but I always say is that you'll know right away. Go to our website. If you don't see our logo, that is not us. And you'll know within 5 seconds of interacting because you know what it's like to call us. There's no 1-800 numbers. You know what our voicemails are like. You know what our phone on hold is like.
Yep.
It's a whole different experience than any other bank.
Yeah,
so
totally.
Very good question.
Yeah.
What were some of the early challenges that you faced when you first started up? You had that little store in Clayton, and then what were some
I think,
difficulties?
first was dealing with who's this young 30-year-old that he doesn't know what the hell he's doing.
Yeah.
So in terms of Clayton coming in there, they were well established. They were stuck in their ways, fixed mindset. And here's this young buck coming into town, changing everything. And so you had not only from the employee standpoint, but also the customers that, hey, some of these people that weren't really good fits for us anymore, they're friends with people in the community. So I had to deal with all that. But again, going through storytelling, you got to get down here to get back up. And so that, in terms of that piece of it, was the difficult part up in that existing office. Down here, it was, again, I think people were excited, for another new bank. But at the reality that we are not established. Who is this? What's this all about? It's just another bank because we didn't have what we have today. Mm-hmm. Now it sells itself. In those early days, it didn't, sell itself. Mm-hmm. I had to work very hard, in convincing those customers that I worked with before how this was going to be successful, this is not just a fly of the, night situation that we're here today and gone tomorrow. And that obviously, me being a partner owner in this, I'm not going anywhere. Mm-hmm. That's the thing in the banking environment. You never know that sign is going to change, right?
Yep.
You never know. And you got to go through, well, how do I know that's not going to happen here again? Because I'm not switching banks. Mm-hmm. But obviously you can see, and we talk to our employees, that's one thing our employees don't have to worry about. We're not motivated by the money. Yes, we could sell tomorrow. Mm-hmm. That's not mine and partners' vision. We don't have to do that. We don't want to do that. Yeah. We enjoy this too much. And so, obviously, again, what we built now it's super easy compared to what it was in the early days. I remember we were just telling this joke I got two individuals, my chief retail officer, Crystal, and Jeanette, who's my chief hero officer. They've been with me since day one, and Jeanette started on a card table. Crystal was the person answering the phones at the front, But these are the people that have made Citizens so successful. But in those early days, oh my God, someone walked in.
Yeah.
You know, where's our brochure? What do we do? How do we say this? We didn't have the training down. We didn't have our defined core values. We didn't have, our mission statement was different back then. I think initially it was your partner in banking. And the reason why I established that mission was because my clients felt like I was a partner in their business. And so that's what started the whole thing. But obviously we evolved beyond that from when we started. So I remember a lot of sleepless nights in the beginning of like, hey, I got partners. We got to make money. How are we going to do this? And I remember, watching every nickel and dime, like, oh my God, we're going to pay $45 for that picture on the wall, But I think a lot of people have that story when they start their own business. I think the business owners that start out, they think, I'm going to make all this money, and they get overextended. That's where you see troubles.
Yeah.
So, and I was always fortunate that Crystal and Jeanette from day one understood that. They were so engaged and looked at it the same way. And that's what we have as an organization now, that all of our people are truly engaged and they understand what makes us so successful.
Did you have some unique or creative things that you did in the early days? Because now it's not easy, but
Yeah.
now that you got the big building, you can have fun games
Yes.
and coffee shops. But for somebody else maybe starting out in business,
Yeah.
what were some early things when it was that I have like $45, I can't pay for that picture. So what were some creative things that you had to do to set yourself apart without kind of having that capital to back it up?
Yeah, I think right away, I tell everybody it starts at the top, leading by example, having fun. People say, I want to change my culture. And I meet with a lot of people. Hey, this is what you can do. I can give you the roadmap, but 90% of you are going to fail because your leader is not all in and doesn't represent these. So I was someone that no matter what, you got to have fun. I mean, that starts with, the fish books. I don't know if you ever read those, but that's one of the things all of our employees read right away. No matter what you're doing, no matter how mundane and boring that process is, you got to have fun doing it. And I established that right away. Joking around, going out and having fun, throwing the football, that was in our DNA right away. And that was really important. And actually, one of our first programs that is still in place today is the funny board. This is something, I don't remember where I read this in a book or a paper, but that's where I get a lot of my ideas. I'm always thinking, hey, let's try this, and how it first started out, we had a little break room in the corner, and there's an office there now, but we had a little whiteboard, and we said, okay, when something funny happens in the office, let's write that down, and then you identify who, wrote it down. And at the end of each quarter, we're going to look at this and decide what was the funniest thing that happened during the quarter, and we'll give that person $50 in cash. And that today is still in our organization. Obviously, it's not on a whiteboard with all the 100. We have it now in each of our offices. It's all electronic, but we still look at those. And what does that do? That sets the tone right away. When we hire someone, fun is one of our core values. Work hard, play hard. And sometimes we have customers that say, do you guys ever work? Yeah. Well, we work our ass off, but we play pretty damn hard too. And that sets the tone right from day one that, fun is got to be talked about every single day. And so it's always good at the end of each quarter to look back and like, oh my God, I forgot all about that. And I could tell you some pretty wild stories of things that have happened over the years that you look back and like, oh my God, that was hilarious in those early days, back to someone getting their bumper ripped off in the drive-through and coming back in, and we literally handed over there's so many that we kind of push the envelope sometimes a little bit, but
You got one. You got one.
I got a lot. And I'll leave that for off camera.
Yeah, there you go.
But that's a tangible example of a way to develop your culture, right?
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of people that would not be good employees at Citizens because they're not that type of person. They wouldn't enjoy that. So by putting that out there, you're immediately eliminating the people that don't align with that. So I think that's great.
And that's very important.
Yeah. Tell us about the renovation of the bank. When did that happen? Was that a kind of a turning point for the bank, or was that just? Tell us more about that.
You're talking about the cafe?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was, so it was actually established in 2018. For a couple of years before that, again, my brain doesn't shut off of thinking about the next big thing. And prior to that, it was a conventional bank, huge teller line. Seemed like half the lobby was a teller line. Well, no, but you don't need a teller line anymore. And, also at the same time, I was thinking like, this office is in downtown. I know there's a lot of small businesses that don't have a meeting area or a networking area. And we're big on creating value, bringing business customers together. And so when thinking about that, and also the amount of money that people waste on coffee. So there's a lot of these thoughts that were going through my head, even though I wasn't a coffee drinker. And I think it was probably 2 years prior to, so probably 2016, I was like, okay, we got to, plus we're running out of space on the first floor. That was when everything was just on the first floor. We had these huge offices, huge furniture. I mean, we can utilize this space a lot better. So it was a combination of all those things, but at the end of the day, I wanted to create that wow factor. And this had never been done before, you know, and that's where, but at the time it wasn't called a cafe, but I was like, I want to create this openness, this networking area. And, you know, had this idea in my head and really hadn't even brought it up to the board of my partners at this point because I wasn't close to presenting and identified, all right, I need to start working with a contractor and what my vision was. And, you know, at first, you know, the conventional companies that work with banks, they're like, well, you can't do that. I'm like, well, that's what we're going to do. Well, I've never seen that in a bank before. You can't do that. You can't do that. Another example, telling me I can't do something.
Yeah.
I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
You know? So literally then I was, there was one picture of an airport in some foreign country that I saw in a magazine. And that kind of gave me the inspiration for like the teller line that you see now. And it kind of all came together after that, after many redos with a gentleman out of Minneapolis and had worked with coffee shops in the past. And, but it wasn't smooth sailing because I was doing something that was nobody had ever seen before.
Yeah.
And so then I, you know, go to the board. I'm like, I think we got this. And what? You're going to spend how much on what? This doesn't make any sense. And thankfully they got on board, and it's been a game changer. Mm-hmm. And it was one of the best investments that tells our story immediately when you come in. And granted, we had some of this stuff before. The citizens experience was actually there before that. But this took it to the next level. And at the same time, you know, looking at checking accounts, another example where checking accounts are boring.
Yeah.
It's a free checking account. Well, how do you compete with that? At the same time, I'm like, our team, our senior leadership team was talking about, we got to create something different that creates value. And so that's where the whole Get More thing came in, you know, where you can get the cell phone protection, roadside assistance, credit monitoring, the discounts and the apps, and then throw in the coffee in there. Mm-hmm. The average person spends $1,100 a year in coffee.
Really?
So you talk about creating value. That one perk right there, if they come through and collect Tivo coffee, which is phenomenal, I can put $1,100 back in someone's pocket. Yeah. What other bank can say that? And that's just one example.
Yeah.
That's creating real value. And $1,100 to someone, if I said I can write you a check for $1,100,
I'll take it.
Are you going to take it? You can go buy some nice clothing. You can go on a nice trip, right?
Yeah.
That's
totally.
very powerful.
Yep.
Nobody else has that.
Yep.
So yes, there's a cost, and people always are like, what's the fine print? There is none.
Yeah.
Do we lose money on it? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because we got to pay for some of these things. We got to pay for the cell phone protection, the roads, all these things. But then also from the business standpoint, that our app helps push our consumer customers into our business customers by giving them a deal. Mm-hmm. So another example of how we create value for our business customers, and not only on the consumer side, but on the business side. So that was a kind of a game changer for us. You know, prior to that, we always had the rock and roll music, or you might come in, you'll hear Nelly on the radio. That was there before that, but this just took it to the next level.
I love that because I always joke that my spiritual gift is fun. So I'm always like, I'm not going to do anything unless it's fun. So it's like,
yes.
Anywhere I've ever worked, it's how can I make this fun? Even if it's a boring job. Let's just
Exactly.
have fun, because if you're having fun, it inevitably spills over to the next person. And so I think I think more businesses need to have a core value and literally instill it, right?
Yeah, some say it.
Our core value is fun, and then you walk in and you're like, everybody here is dead. Like, that's not fun.
It's all about celebrating. So every day someone should be celebrating what their biggest win was. We have a celebration meeting every month. We celebrate with full open book. Or people have a holiday, a Christmas party. We have a celebration party. Yep. And that's all underneath our core value of fun. Work hard, play hard. But like you say, some people, that's not for them.
Yep.
And they might be a great employee on the resume and a great employee at another bank. We're very upfront with that.
Yeah.
That this place is different. And it's not about just doing your job well, because we're going to work you out. That does not work in this organization. If you don't align with our core values and you talk about the fun, you won't last in this organization. So we got to be very upfront about that it's loud and obnoxious. Are you going to be participating in that? If not, this is probably not a good fit for you.
Yeah, totally.
But I think if you, sorry, I
good.
keep
Go
interrupting
ahead.
you. I was
Go
gonna
ahead.
say, but if you think about it though, we spend so much time training employees on here's how to do customer service. You want to know the best, like the easiest way to do customer service is have an employee who's like actually in a good mood and enjoying what they're doing, because then it comes naturally, as opposed to our core values fun. We don't really have fun, but then we need to train you to be, we need to be friendlier to the guests, and we need to have better customer service. As opposed to if the actual culture and the climate and the environment that you're in is fun and you're happy and you're enjoying it and laughing, guess what's going to happen? You're going to spill over and be fun and friendly and outgoing to the customer, and it inevitably creates like good customer service.
Yes.
Like it's kind of
It's
like
radiate. It becomes contagious.
Yeah.
You know, if you surround yourself with that, you become that. And we hire new people from that actually do come from another bank, and actually a lot of times we try to find someone that's not in banking, because people that have been in banking for many years in our bank will not adjust to our culture. So, you know, that's why we hire on attitude, that we can groom that. But yeah, it's really important that they understand, you know, what this is all about. And you're going to have that because then you have fun with the customers. Like you say, most people don't want to go to their bank. We have customers that every day, they love to come because you're like, God, what are you guys doing that's having fun here today? Yeah. You know, what can I learn? But also doing that with our customers too, our business clients, and saying, what can you do to help your culture better? Because at the end of the day, if you can't have any fun, it's not worth it. I believe in that.
Yeah.
Big time.
Yeah. So you've mentioned your 3 uniques. You've mentioned your core values, your guarantee. Yeah. That comes from the EOS framework, right?
Yes.
So tell us about that. When was that implemented? How has that impacted your business?
Yeah, I think EOS, don't quote me on this, was probably about 5 years ago.
Okay.
And we were very fortunate that we had a lot of these things already in place. And so when I was at a presentation, I saw this and I brought it back to my senior leadership group. And, you know, I felt like, man, this makes a lot of sense. But a classic case of that, I can't come into the meeting and say, we're going to do this. I was kind of like, hey, guys, read this book. Let me know what your thoughts are. You know, like, here's Dennis with another book. He's got another
Coming back from a conference with all these ideas.
Here's another thing, rah, rah, rah. And it was interesting that, you know, a couple were ahead of each other, and I could see that they started asking questions like, this might make some sense. Because we always operated at a higher level. We're going a million miles, and that's why our success has been like this. That's our DNA. And some people don't want that, but look out, we're going. And through that, I think sometimes, you know, in my mind, did I always properly communicate what the top priorities were? Probably not, even though I was always throwing out stuff there. But also, how did that resonate and communicate through the entire organization? And at that time, we had core values. I think we had 26 core values.
Okay.
It was a typical, you know, whatever. And even though we had all the success every year, beating budget, it was like, we're kicking ass. Why do we got to worry about this? You know, we have a better model than anybody that we know of. And so when they were like, yeah, this would be great. And so let's do it. You know, let's better define all these things. And that's where we, you know, better defined our core values as fun, responsive, attitude, accountable, excellence, and engaged. Those are our 6 core values that we live and breathe. And really from the hiring process through coaching, everything. And then we'll give someone, you know, the 3 chances to align that maybe they're struggling in one area, but eventually you're going to be worked out of the organization if you're no longer a right fit. And we have some that were great fits years ago and they were aligned, but things change. And we got to be committed to the process that, you know what, no longer, we're not going to have you negatively impact, and then there's a better opportunity for you. And that's okay. You know, because we're not going to change who we are. This is why we've been so successful. So I think to accomplish that, I'm kind of getting sidetracked here, is that too many companies, especially now, are worried about turnover. Oh my God, how am I getting another person? But you can't let that bad apple, if you're true about your culture and your core values, you got to get that person moved out. There's better, and you know, if they're not happy, it's all about happiness. You know what? And they need to move on. Next person up, find the next person that better aligns with your needs. And especially us over the 18 years, our needs have changed drastically. So that employee that might have been a rock star 5 years ago, well, we're a different company now. So if that person hasn't had that growth mindset, maybe they haven't changed, you know, it's probably not a good fit anymore. And you got to be okay with it. It's not to say they're a bad person. Yeah. It's just we have an expectation of this and what this all means.
And you're almost doing them a disservice by keeping them on if they're not a good fit anymore. And they're not having fun. And yeah. And basically, you know, EOS traction, I would say at that point, it basically put us on steroids. That's where, and it was pretty close to that same time about the cafe. And I was like, whoa, man, we are taking off, you know, like record growth. It was like, holy cows. And we're not even trying hard anymore. You know, like those early years, man, I had to work it hard to get
every deal. And it's like, now, record number of accounts again this month, number of record amounts, and, and the reviews and everything. And it's like, man, but, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Is it difficult, or is it just something in you to remain humble and hungry, though? Because you keep taking off.
Yep.
But then I feel like when you start to be the rock star, you're nationally recognized.
Yeah.
Okay, you can start to kind of feel yourself like, okay, we're doing pretty good, and almost take your foot off the gas. Or is there something in you that's just
Ask my team about that.
you can't take
Because sometimes I hear that they're like, man,
Right.
but if you stop growing and changing, you're going to be passed up. And I think in terms of being humble, I think I'm very humble because of my upbringing. I talk about that, is that I know what it's like to be, you have nothing, and so I don't ever take anything for granted, every morning. And I encourage all people to do this. I write down the 3 things I'm most grateful for that morning, because they can all change tomorrow, and obviously we've had a lot of success, but it could be something catastrophic could happen in the world or whatever that could change. And you always got to be thinking, what can I do to help prevent that? And you can't stop. And that's one thing I challenge. We've had situations of this where you get people that, like, they call it burnout or whatever, because our pace is going like this. You try to help them through those and those things that you're doing, but we're not going to change the way we are. This is why we are so successful. Other banks are all flat, not going anywhere, laying people off, closing offices. But going through that, people can get tired and like, I just want to go like this. And that's no longer. We got to be true to ourselves.
Yeah.
Good question.
And you can't change from what got you to where you are.
Exactly.
It's like, okay, well, I got to grind and hustle because things are bad. So you do all this stuff to get to this good place, whether that's business or just like your emotional, spiritual state, right?
Yes.
Like, I'm struggling, so I do something, and then it's working out. Well, now I feel good. And then that's all of a sudden where you stop doing what you were doing to get there.
Yeah.
And then you tank to the bottom. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense, even if it's...
Well, I think so much of this too is, and I relate this, that I took this thing on Facebook. This is like 6-7 years ago, and it was asking you questions. You may have seen this, that let's see what your real profession should have been based off what your likes and interests are. And I don't know why I wouldn't typically take this, but I was waiting or something, so I took this, and I started laughing. I'm like, no way. And I always thought if I wasn't in banking, maybe I'd be an accountant, because I like numbers. Originally, I was going to be an engineer, but I didn't end up doing that because I took the test, and unfortunately, true story is I looked around the room and it was all males. I wasn't going to go to college. At that time, that was my motivation.
Yeah.
So that's all. I didn't end up going to school to be an engineer, so I missed that part of it. But taking this quiz, it said I should be a psychologist. And I'm like, what? And the more I thought about it, it's spot on. That's my job as a leader. I'm a psychologist. Yes, there's numbers and all these things, but how we've been successful, you got to identify how to motivate each person differently. And in, business situations with customers, psychologists, how am I helping them? They might be going through a difficult time with their staff or their spouse. I'm there. That's really my job. So it's really not about numbers. And that goes back to my early years of coaching. And I learned so much from, being a youth coach to an upper level coach. And I still coach to this day, and I love it. I love the challenge, even though, coaching youth is getting much more difficult nowadays because of things that are going on in terms of kids don't want to be motivated. They don't want to be told they're not doing a good job. And that's what's really scary, because those are the kids that are not going to be successful. And it's the same thing when we hire them right out of college. You can see there's a big difference. But that's really what I'm doing every day. So I'm just coaching my team to greatness. Get them to believe my players to run through that wall. If they can believe it, they're going to do it. And so that's a lot of things that I took away from, all my years of coaching and really developing to a leader to be a successful organization.
So in regards to having a good culture and finding the right people, how much of that is somebody's innate personality to just be a part of the Citizens culture? How much of that is actually learned and trained on when you hire them?
Well, I always say that it's a little bit of both, but it's really, I think, the model that we have, because every one of these employees have worked somewhere else. Why wasn't their culture like that?
Yeah.
Even though they had that in it. And we have organizations that, people are always calling our people because we're the best of the best. They know we have the best culture. We're the, all the other accolades. And I think, well, they've hired this person. Now they're going to change their organization. It doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And that's why those people end up miserable over there. It's part of the DNA when you come in. You got to have a certain, we can't completely change someone. There's only so much. But if you can find it, it's in there, That's where it all starts. And then you create this environment around it that just keeps that whole thing going. And it just becomes in departments. And if you get one of those one bad ones, you got to get that bad one out, because that is not what we represent. But again, that's why we hire on attitude, whereas most banks hire on the resume. Our learning curve might be a lot longer. And that's also, too, if you look at our demographic, it's probably much younger than the average bank for that reason. We'll sacrifice not having that experience at a resume to get the right person in the attitude. And that's always been our part of our success. And most banks and organizations do not do that. They think, oh, this person knows how to do this. Well, you can't undo their bad habits.
Yeah.
And so we work really hard on that screening process during the interview. And every once in a while, a wrong one slips through.
Yep.
It's only human.
So in interviewing people, how do you tangibly look at that, gauge somebody's attitude, their work ethic, based off of an interview or a resume?
Well, work ethic, I always say, there's a correlation. You find someone that has had many jobs at a young age. I always also someone grew up on a farm. They understand it, because the younger generation doesn't have work ethic. What did you do in college? And I tell the story. I had 3 jobs because I paid for everything myself.
Yep.
That says something to me versus someone that didn't have a job in college. Oh, well, I got to go home and see the parents this weekend. I can't work, You can pick it up that way. But also, too, is that when and I probably shouldn't be giving this away, but when you interview at Citizens, really, you're interviewed from the minute you're walked in that door.
Yeah.
It's not when it gets, I meet everybody in the finalist, the 3rd interview, but the minute you walk in that front door, you're already being assessed. How did you treat that receptionist?
Yeah.
Okay. Then you go up and you're going to be in front of my assistant. You're graded there. Okay. I've had situations where, the interview was phenomenal. This person, like, oh, this person will be perfect. I go out and I see the scorecards from the other 2. Treated those people like, they were better than them. Don't hire the person. So that's just part of it.
Now the secret's out.
What's that?
Now the secret's out.
Yeah. You can. People always try to copycat us.
Yeah.
I say that's an honor.
Yeah.
But there's a difference between knowing and executing. Big difference.
So you talk about motivating your team and motivating in people differently depending on what they're going through and stuff like that. What are some practical ways that somebody can motivate their team?
Well, I think it starts by leading by example, but appreciation. And especially, someone can hear 10 great things and they hear something maybe they're not doing as good as they should be. All they hear is that one thing.
Yep.
So you got to, especially in this society, what we're working in, you got to work really hard on that. And one of those things we have is it's called Limeade. It's a software where we measure weekly happiness. Also, where you got cheers, saying positive things to your coworkers. That's happening on a daily basis. But also just calling them, out of the blue, like I'll call another office and say, hey, I heard this. Great job.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Or write them a note. Leave them a voicemail. People can't hear that enough. You can take employees granted way too easily. But motivating, again, in our culture, it's all about winning. Some people don't really care about winning. We're not the organization for that. It will expose you pretty quickly because we're a high-performing organization. And if you're not on board for that, it kind of will create a divide, unfortunately. That's, it's good and bad because there might be good people that would work very, very well in another organization, but eventually if they see they're not part of that fit, it's not going to be. So we're all about high five, celebrating, and we've been very fortunate to be recognized, and we win a lot. But again, you can't take that for granted that you win and lose together. That's why I talk about our celebration meetings. Every month we're celebrating together. Every part of it, from knowing that potential customer called and had an interaction, and whoever answered the phone that day, they're part of that success. So it's every day.
What are some of the accolades and cool things that you guys have been nominated for, won as a bank?
Best bank to work for, top bank, a lot of these things that we don't strive for just happens, top rated, fastest growing, all those things. And, there's been many interviews, articles, like they hear about, like, is this really true? Can I interview you and talk about this? And, you talk about someone that maybe it'd be on the other side of the country, they still don't fully understand because they say, oh yeah, I know this bank that does that too, or does this too. And you don't truly understand until you walk into our place to know the true difference. Because, there's a lot of great banks out there that they work hard on their culture and they have great customer service, but they really truly don't understand until they walk into one of our offices. So also the awards I'm very proud of is, the impact in the community. Like last year we got the Give Award from United Way. The Boys and Girls Club recognized us too for giving. So I could go on, and we have a pretty big trophy case. We don't have a trophy case in the cafe. They reside down in the lower level. But again, that's not what motivates us. It's about really that impact. And so it's really special that when I started the organization, I was very involved in the community. So I was the one that was kind of doing all that stuff. My organization, my employees didn't really. But when I see now what we've developed, all the things that just naturally happen, and that's part of the review process. They're evaluated on their engagement and giving back in the community. Because that's not just a bank's organization, it's an individual. That's how we have such a great community. And it takes many people because so many people want to, I call it BMW, bitchin', moanin', whining. You ever heard that term before?
No, but I like it.
So they want a BMW and not do a damn thing about it. So if you want to do that, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
And that's my philosophy.
Yeah. You talked early on about when you were starting off, you were the guy that was controlling everything. You were looking at every step of every process. How did you eventually let go of that and delegate that to your team?
Yeah, I think, it's over the years it was happening, but I think Traction, EOS, had a big part of that, identifying the vision integrator. And I was fortunate to have a phenomenal executive team around me that I developed to a point that, if I got hit by a truck, day to day, nothing's going to change. Now, long-term visionary, that might change.
Yeah.
And but it wasn't that way probably for the first 8 or 10 years.
Okay.
Had to really work on that because when you let go, people are going to fail. But you got to let them fall on their face, and they're going to learn more from their mistakes than their successes. And that's okay. But you got to make sure you have checks and balances in place too, that you can rest assured, especially in a banking environment, with all the regulations and potential loss of funds. You got to make sure you have the right people there. But it was also bringing in higher level people. You can only get to a certain point. I recognized that several years ago. Like, okay, we need some more top end chief level people, and we did that and reevaluated that, and that really took us to the next level. And it gives me comfort that I don't have to be involved in the day to day. But now there's certain situations where I do have to. Like I have a situation going on right now with the staff and department changing over. I actually have rolled up my sleeves and I'm back in the saddle, and I love it.
Cool.
Being part of that because that's what I did from day one.
Yeah.
And I don't get a lot of that anymore. I don't get that's the other thing is that it's hard not knowing everything. When a customer will ask me about a certain thing or a procedure, an employee asks me, I'm like, I can tell you, but I don't know if I go off that 100%. You got to be okay with that because that's what I see too is we've had people that were phenomenal employees that got put in a leadership role that really they're not in terms of a manager. They're good leaders that they're hard workers, but they're not managers because they don't know how to delegate, and that can kill a team. And so I strongly believe that if I wasn't adapted to being a better delegator, getting out of the way, we wouldn't be even close to where we are right now. You have to do that, allow your company to grow.
That's great.
So we got to change topics because everybody who's watching is thinking, this guy's in banking. So the big question is, mortgage rates. What's your prediction?
That's pretty boring.
For the next 12 months, where do you think they're going to go? Come on,
throw a dart.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy how much they've increased, and obviously that affects the real estate market.
Yep.
But my thing is that they should increase a long time ago.
Yeah.
And we were a little too reactive to this, and it's causing some of this. When you say mortgage rates, there's different perspective because we do a lot of commercial business, which is different than what people are thinking about home mortgages. Yeah. Two independent things. But obviously both are really high. You talk about a 20-year fixed home mortgage rates in the 8% range. Yeah. Whoever would have thought when some people got them in the 2%. Yep. You can afford a lot less in the house. My opinion is that I'm aligned with most economists that, things will be kind of flat here a little bit, but you think about 12 months, there's going to be relief. That's just naturally how it goes because, indications of the economy and things are slowing. We're seeing that in terms of on the commercial side, that there's not as many projects. And when some of these notes on the commercial side come up for maturity, I don't know how some of these developers, banks are going to get through that. We're fortunate. We're not exposed to that at all. So when it brings adversity, it puts us, Citizen State Bank, because we do things the right way, in a very good position. But I think they're going to be kind of stable here, not much change. And in 12 months, you'll see them down.
Yeah, everyone's jumping for joy. Oh, they're coming down.
Yeah, I don't think we'll ever see back to where they were. That was crazy.
Yeah.
That wasn't good. They should have been more proactive on that. I was saying that for a long time, and they just waited too long. And they created this, this inflation problem and everything else that's going on. But it's part of the cycle.
Yeah.
And that's why I say is that, and another thing, just, for business owners, in good times, anybody can make money. Just like in banking. Anybody could run a bank the last, 15, 20 years. It wasn't really difficult, except for the Great Recession. I guess there were some banks in there. But when things turn, the strong survive and they get better. And so when this economy and everything is, goes down, that's going to make Citizen State Bank even stronger. And we're in a really good position. But I can't stress the importance of cash is king. And I think about a lot of commercial real estate developers, people that are in real estate. Not many have a cash cushion. They don't have that plan B, and they're already like, man, if my note renews at 8.5%, 9%, I don't know what they're going to do. Mm-hmm. So I can't stress the importance. They say, well, I got equity in properties. But remember, at that point, banks are going to be less likely to lend to you. Mm-hmm. Seen it before, and so I can't stress the importance of cash is king, and also being with a bank that really will work with you. That's one that's truly unique. You go back to the Great Recession. I don't know of any other bank that did not call a note due or not renew a note. We didn't do that to one customer. We believe we're going to do this. We're going to work through those difficult times. So banking with Citizens, you get an insurance policy. Yes, we might not be the lowest cost provider because we provide an experience and value like no other. But be careful. If you're always going for that lowest cost provider, it's going to come back to burn you. And I can tell you many stories where customers chose that and it burned them. So it's something to think about as you go into the future, making sure you're going to have a bank that's going to work with you, that when you get in those difficult times, they're there for you. But really preserve cash because there's going to be great opportunities. That's when you make your money. Yeah. You don't make your money when times are great and everybody's buying and selling. You make it when there's adversity. So have patience in that. It's what I tell everybody. Have patience. Let that cash sit there right now because you're going to have some great opportunities.
How much liquidity do you recommend investors, business owners, people having on hand?
Well, it depends
typically
on your size.
And
That's
like a percentage of revenue or percentage of expenses, or
I think for an operating business, it's different. If an operating business, I would say 3 to 6 months. Mm-hmm. I think 6 months is more appropriate, depending on how volatile your business is and how it could be affected. Real estate there too. I think a 6 month. Because you never know what's going to happen in terms of supply could change significantly, and all of a sudden you got a vacancy issue, you're having to lower your rents. That could be even a 6 to 12. We got, some customers that, say have $100 million in assets. That's a whole different ball game. And even though you have a lot of equity, that can go real quick.
Yeah.
And the number of people that are willing to refinance that gets reduced. So your options are really dry and you could be in a real big pickle. And then you have one domino that falls. They just keep going.
Great. So what do the next 5 years of Citizens look like? You talk about big things. I don't know if you can share anything or not, but
yeah, we're going to continue. We have never had the desire to grow for the sake of growing. Like other banks and CEOs, they want to grow. Why? We have never had that mindset. We have never had an acquisition, but yet we're still one of the fastest growing banks.
Yeah.
It's because of how we take care of the customer and we take care of our people. That is not going to change. So if we see an opportunity where we can, create more opportunities for the employees, but also touch more potential customers and give them an experience they never had before, we're going to take advantage of those opportunities. But we're never going to jeopardize for what we built. We've looked at opportunities for acquisitions, and many of those are just not a right fit. We don't have to do it. We're already growing. We don't need more overhead or headaches. I'm fine. Why do I need that? I'm not going to sacrifice what we built that is so unique. So that's always there. So, we're going to continue to grow. If the right situation came along, we would take advantage of that, but we don't need to do that. And there was also a period where a lot of banks have been acquired over the last several years. What some of these other banks have paid is way over market. Doesn't make any sense. We're not going to get in that battle. But again, as some of these banks have adversity, which is going to happen in the next couple of years, it might create some opportunities for us. And we'd be really poised. But again, making it very clear, we don't have to be a couple $2 billion bank. It's no desire. We're very profitable right now. We're doing very well. And never want to jeopardize that because too many businesses and banks get caught up in that and they change everything and they go backwards. So it's very important to keep that in mind.
Great. Well, if you want to leave our listeners with one last thing, what if you want them to take one thing away from this episode, what would that be?
I just go back to attitude. When I go talk to students or at the university or various groups, they always want, what's the secret of your success? And they think like there's this magic wand, or you need to do this. And I said, it's not rocket science. It's something you can create right now and work. It's like a muscle, is your attitude. And one of my favorite quotes is, A bad attitude is like a flat tire. You can't go anywhere with it. Doesn't matter how smart you are, how hard you work. Your attitude sucks. Nobody wants to be around you. People will not follow you when you try to lead. There's nothing more important than that is the attitude.
That's great.
Yeah, love that. So,
Well, thanks for being here, Dennis. This was great. I'm sure everybody got a ton out of it. It was great. I've never really heard your full story, so
Yep.
that was great.
There's a
to
lot
hear
more
that,
there, but
and-
we condensed it and hopefully
Yeah.
got a few things there. So I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, thanks for being
awesome. And I encourage anybody who is local, like if you don't bank at Citizens, at least stop by, drive over, go inside, check it out. It really is unique banking. So I encourage all of our listeners to go check it out.
Yeah, and I always say that. Just go look at our reviews and compare them to any other bank's reviews.
here. Yeah.
It sells itself right there.
Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in. We sincerely hope that you found value in today's episode and learned at least one thing that you can take back and implement into your lives and businesses. As always, we appreciate your support and hope you can all find a way to pay it forward this week.